Hi everyone. So we forgot to mention at the beginning that one of our speakers, Manoj, she wasn't able to attend today. She's been unwell, so we're just giving every speaker a little bit extra time. And the next two speakers are very, very glad for that, which is great. So next we have Jane Thomas, and Jane has worked at the Royal Darwin Hospital for over 21 years, and most of that time has been in the intensive care unit. Jane currently works as research coordinator in the ICU, and approximately 50% of the patients that are cared for in the RDH ICU are Aboriginal, and many more come from remote communities and homelands. Within the context of clinical trials and routine patient and family follow-up, Jane has been faced with and learnt from many unique and challenging experiences, both culturally and geographically in the vast top end. Jane has written that she has no special skills but really likes cooking and makes a mean lemon tart. You know, morning tea is coming up soon, so just saying. Jane also enjoys dressing up and going for long walks in wild places.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's an interactive session, so you can say back. This is the plan for my talk. It's I'm going to make it as quick as possible because I want to get out of here. Declarations. I've got a couple of declarations. I want to paint the picture of our ICU and then talk about what we're here for, some of the cultural considerations that we face day to day in our ICU. My declaration is that I no longer work in the ICU, but there's a big part of my heart in the ICU at Royal Darwin Hospital. Worked there for many years and loved my work, and it's always been a special place in my nursing career. I do have the current director of the ICU is very happy for me to continue to represent the ICU in this forum. So that said, and the last one is I don't stand here and to pretend to be an expert in Aboriginal culture. This is very much our experience, my experience over many years. I've worked with Aboriginal people personally for about 30 years in total. So moving on. There's a lot of, compared to other states, that we have 30% Aboriginal people in our 250,000 population in the Northern Territory. There's a mistake in this slide, and if anyone can tell me what it is, I'll buy you a lemonade later. Many of our Aboriginal people and those people that we look after in our ICU live on remote communities or outstations. This is one such remote community. This is on the Tiwi Islands. It's a beautiful part of the world. Look at that. It's fine and 32. The waters are still, plenty of fish in the sea. There'll be an afternoon sea breeze coming in. But the only way to get there is plane or boat. You can see that bottom left-hand picture is the barge coming in. That's how they get their stores into the island. About the Royal Darwin Hospital, it's about 300 beds, and you probably think, doesn't she know how many beds she's got in her hospital? Well, we're in a bit of a state of flux. Things are happening. They've opened a regional hospital in the satellite city of Palmerston, so I don't know what's going on. Sort of old patients have moved out and some cancer patients are coming in. So, it's about a 300-bed hospital. Concerningly, when you think, the total percent of our population that is Aboriginal, it's 60% to 70% of our patients in hospital are Aboriginal people. The RDH, it's a busy little place if you ever want to come and visit. It operates probably at 100 to 110 capacity on a daily basis. It's pumping, really, very often. And that, of course, translates to, in our ICU perspective, bed block. So you can see it affects everyone, and the poor ED nurses, they're just under attack day in, day out. They're better men and women than me, I think. Just about the ICU itself, it's an 18-bed ICU. It's mixed. We have children. We have children that big and that big, and we get 40 to 50 a year. But so we should get sort of 3 a month, you'd say, or maybe 1 a week. But bless their cotton socks, they tend to come 10 at a time. You know, in 2 weeks you have 10 kids. How did that happen? But you know what it's like. You get more interaction. And when you've got all those kids in the ICU, when we're used to adults, you know you're alive. The average Apache, I haven't done this very well, I'm sorry, but the 18.59 is our Aboriginal patients. This is over a 6-year period, so the severity of illness, Apache 2, is about 18 for our Aboriginal patients compared to 16 and a bit for our non-Aboriginal patients. I'd prefer to be the 16 and a bit. It all adds up. It all means you're sicker. Okay. The average age for our Wirrallah young population, including me, between 40 and 50, I suppose, but the Aboriginal people, our Aboriginal patients, tend to be younger, about 10 years younger, and 10 years is a big difference if you think across the lifespan. Our core business in the ICU is trauma and sepsis, really bad sepsis. So that's our ICU. So now we'll move on to the bit we want to hear about, the cultural considerations. And before I go on, not all Aboriginal people are the same. There's not one Aboriginal culture. Across communities, there's different nations, there's different... not all Aboriginal people are the same. Something to bear in mind. I can only tell you, I'm going to tell you bits, commonalities that we see across the people that we meet on a day-to-day basis. And I suppose I could have skirted around this or not mentioned it at all, but the state of health. We need to talk about this. We need to talk about it a lot more than we do. Life expectancy of our Aboriginal people is 10 years, less than non-Aboriginal people. Like I say, 10 years means a lot to me. We have the highest rate of rheumatic heart disease in the world in our remote communities. It's an entirely preventable disease, but we have the highest rates up there in the Northern Territory. Suicide is close to my heart. I'm a bit miserable, aren't I? But my friend did commit suicide, and you know when that happens, when someone has a sickness, an unusual thing, you sort of listen out for it, don't you? And when I was doing my public health studies, I sort of was on the march to stop suicide, particularly among our young people across Australia. But it's, I don't know, since I've been doing my studies, I think it is increasing. It is increasing, but mostly so in the Northern Territory among our young Aboriginal people. As I was preparing this talk, in one community, 3 young people in a 2-week period took their own life. There's lots of chronic diseases, of course, heart disease, diabetes. One of our specialists says if your patient is not a diabetic, ask why, because we have missed looking after our diabetic patients sometimes, how they should be looked after. I suppose we've become immune to it. Many of our patients have one or more comorbidities, and diabetes and renal failure are the real biggies up there. Why is this so? Why is Aboriginal health so bad? So there's so many reasons. Historically, the dispossession of land, culture, kinship, and today sort of the more environmental things that we know happen, the poverty, overcrowding, people, poor education, it all adds up. There's 101 reasons that would take 2 weeks to talk about, but it all adds up, and there's lots of work to do. But what we must do is understand it's there and help our Aboriginal people move on. The Aboriginal perspective of health, it is It's different to the Western model of health. You can tell I did grad dip in public health, can't you? Funny words. But home is where health is, and by that I mean health is not just merely the absence of disease or being crook. It means everything in the community is healthy, it's home. Is there water in the billabong? Is there fish in the billabong? Are there fish in the sea? It's the health of the whole environment and community. Land is not a resource, it's life, right? So if that's gone, if we take that away, if that's not healthy, we can't be healthy. There are traditional healers very present in our particularly remote Aboriginal communities, and I don't particularly know what they do, but certainly use bush tucker, bush medicines, and it is all important and it means a lot to Aboriginal people. In West Australia, I do know that they're doing great work with some mental health programs, and they're really strongly engaging traditional healers in programs of managing mental health. So you're going to always have to have your tablets, but the traditional healers are really a bonus to their programs, and I would like to see some of that stuff happening in the top end actually. There's a supernatural thing that I can't really talk about because I don't know because I'm Ballender, but there is definitely this notion, this phenomena of there's something. It's not real. I don't understand it. It's not real to me, but it's very real to Aboriginal people. And when I first came to Australia, I worked in Carnarvon, and I'm not. You probably get sacked today, but the nurses used to say the G'daichi man will get you to get the kids in bed, and they'd go running. They were in bed before you'd finish saying it. So Aboriginal health is quite different to a non-Aboriginal perspective of health. So I talked about home is where health is. So this is a wonderful, this is Warramayunga, Tiwi Island, I was nearly going to say resort, but community. And look at that, beautiful houses right by the sea. It's warm, it's lovely, but probably truly there might not be running water in those houses. There's possibly 15 to 25 people living in those houses. But at least they're at home. At least they're at home. But, that poverty and overcrowding is a problem, and which leads to some of our health problems like rheumatic heart disease. So there they are in the warm, and we bring them into the cold. This is the Royal Darwin Hospital, possibly the coldest and ugliest building in Darwin. But it doesn't mean we don't do good work in the hospital. We do some great work. But for some of our patients that come from remote communities, they've never been in air conditioning before. They've never been in a lift before. That building is 8 stories high. And, those lifts, I don't like the lifts. I'd prefer to take the stairs myself. And it's not uncommon for me to go in and you'll see a lady on her own clambering up the stairs, quite short-winded, because she's scared to get into the lift on her own. And if you come across those patients, of course, you help them up and say, I'm late to work because I had to take a lady to level 5. So, it's often, and the nurses on the ward often have to spend a considerable time outside looking for their patients because their antibiotics are due. It takes a lot of time. This hospital, it doesn't well suit a large proportion of our clientele, but nonetheless do great work. So our challenge is, I suppose, one of our biggest challenges is Aboriginal people speak language. There are many different languages and dialects. On the Northern Territory Aboriginal Interpreter Service, they have about 108 different languages registered. Okay, and many of our patients are multilingual. So that means that English is actually their fourth or fifth language. All right. And then they come into hospital, and we say crazy things to people. Yeah, and I'm not saying this to ridicule Aboriginal people, but like when you say some things are taken literally. So like when you might say, we're going to keep an eye on your kidneys, they think literally, it could be not uncommon for someone to think, oh shit, they're going to stick an eye on my kidney to keep an eye on it, you see. And that is how our English language is, can be funny. When I first came to Australia, I was a cook on a sheep station, and this old fella, Charlie, he was a very fit sort of 60-year-old man, but he told me the first day he met me that he had sugar. And Charlie would never, ever have sugar in his black tea. The blacker, the stronger, the better, but there was nothing you could do to stop Charlie having 2 serves of my apple crumble and custard, because he didn't, that is not sugar, it's not that white bag of sugar. And then there's the things we don't say. I was recently talking to a lady, and her husband came into ICU, and we had to put husband on the kidney machine because his kidneys were cactus. They don't work anymore, she was told. And I was actually going through a survey of how people find things out about their loved ones when they're in ICU. And she told me this story, and she said she was cross because she's told her husband will die if he doesn't have the kidney machine, and then we come along and the nurses just said, oh, he doesn't need it anymore, and took it away. So her interpretation was was actually that we didn't really care anymore for him, and he was probably kaput. So because we were pulling out on him. When you engage with Aboriginal people, you need to tell the whole story, you can't just do things in isolation. A conversation should be a complete conversation. And imagine just generally being in ICU, it's really confronting. I always say to people when they're sad and upset about their husband or whoever being in ICU, you're right to be sad. It's probably one of the most adverse things that can happen to you, your loved one being in that ICU. And imagine, we dehumanise them, don't we? There's machines and drips and everything everywhere. There's doctors and nurses really busy. Where's your husband gone? Where's your loved one gone? So imagine that. And people who non-Aboriginal people are really confronted by that and don't understand that. So imagine when English is your fourth or fifth language. It would be like if you took my glasses from me and took my ears away, I would be completely lost and disempowered as to what's happening to my loved one. It's the only way I can sort of relate to it myself. We do have interpreters. There are so many different languages. We can't have an interpreter for every language every day, all of the time. And the service, it has been historically quite frustrating to get an interpreter for the language you want, when you want. But the hospital have really recognised we need to work in this area, and things are improving there. We have these great people we call Aboriginal liaison officers, and they work as a conduit for information sharing and guiding and possibly advocating for our patients and families. But what the liaison officers in ICU can often get a bit burnt out because they're really called upon by the families, us, and our liaison officers actually cover ICU and ED. So work that out. It's a big, big job. With language, there is not only the verbal thing, there's a lot of unspoken language with Aboriginal people. Aboriginal people themselves use quite a bit of sign. this is Tucker. And a sign I've got to know very well being a research coordinator is like this, and that means go away, I don't want to talk about it right now. Aboriginal people don't like to offend you and say, no, I don't want to do that. They will, they'll politely say, I'll talk tomorrow or whatever. You can pretty well surmise that that means they don't want to talk about what you're talking about. Gestures, I think we as nurses and doctors, we need to be very mindful of what gestures we use. We can be quite inappropriate. Should I go to an elder gentleman, come here, I want to give you antibiotics, that's quite a rude sort of gesture that is not appropriate. So we have to be a bit savvy on what's right and what's wrong. Eye contact, you can look Aboriginal people in the eye. There's this word around town, you can't look them in the eye. You can, and I always look Aboriginal people in the eye, but I don't stare at them. And often if I'm having a big conversation talking about something serious, we're going to be there for a while, like consent for a research study, let's say, I will sit, if I can, sit alongside them. So I'm talking with them, not at them. I don't like to, I will never stand up. For a long conversation, I would never stand up and talk to Aboriginal patient and family. I sit alongside them, I talk with them. Silence is golden. I like a bit of silence myself. People ask me a question, like my mate Bethan said to me some months ago, Jane, will you speak at the ANZICS conference? And I was silent for about 6 months. She took it to mean yes. But, silence is good. Remember, your patients and your families are translating through 4 or 5 languages. It takes time to process that. Often some people say, they might pick up 1 out of 5 words. That can be very, you can really get the wrong story there. So silence helps people process, and it's rude to interrupt that silence. You can tell a story and allow people to sit and think. I went up to see one of our patients on the ward, and I was, oh, hi, Flossie, how are you? Jane from ICU, blah, blah, blah. And she just looked at me. She looked at me and said nothing. And she had a bed by the window, and I thought, I'll just suck it and see. I'll just stand here. And I looked out the window, and I did say, oh, windy today. And after about 2.5 minutes, she said, I know who you are. And after that, we were great mates, actually. I see her around quite a bit. I was going to press the wrong button then. God help us. Literacy, health literacy and reading and writing English. Many people haven't had a complete education. It doesn't mean they are not clever. It means Aboriginal people know so much more than us about the bush, the environment, the world, the importance of looking after the land and the earth. But when it comes to when you're seeking consent for an operation or a research study, giving they often can't read that. And in most cases, I would say 99% of cases when we have Aboriginal people in research studies, I will read the document to them, word for word. And we go backwards and forwards, and that's okay. Family. Family is really important. Like I said before, that's part of what is health, is family. The Aboriginal people have a genius kind of kinship system that's designed to guarantee longevity of the clan. It also gives order in the community. It gives people their roles and responsibilities. I've been to a few sessions on kinship, and it starts off like a wonky, like this person's related to that, like a off-kilter hashtag, and then before I know it, it looks like pickup sticks, and I've completely lost it. I really want to get a handle on it, but I can't. But I do know kinship is really important, and it is said that the erosion of kinship is behind some of our health problems, and that is probably true. An example that was given to me was that the mum and dad have the baby, they love the child, but actually when it comes to disciplining the child or teaching that child ways of growing up and being a good community member, that's for jobs for aunties, okay? So everyone has a role. So it's that classic, it takes two people to have a baby, but a whole community to raise a child. Escort, when patients come in from remote communities, we will ideally have an escort come with that patient, but sometimes we slip up because we think that person is the person who can give information back to the community, perhaps consent for procedures. No. The job of escort has been delegated by the community, but when we've got... am I running over time? No. When we've got big business to talk about, like sorry business, or perhaps someone's going to lose a limb, that escort, they might start hearing these stories of how sick the patient is, and it's well beyond their capability and responsibility to transfer that information and process that information. And often the escorts, if it gets too scary, will shoot through, because there could be they think they're going to be blamed for this terrible thing that's about to happen to the patient. So sometimes we have a rearrangement of our escorts. A spokesperson, we do try to get a spokesperson, a sort of key conduit for information for the whole of the family, because everyone is family. People phone up especially if there's an elder in our ICU, an important person, let's say. Everyone wants to know, and they want to hear it from you. They've heard it at the clinic that Bobby's sick, but they want to hear it from you, and we say this inane question, are you related? And they go, yeah, I'm his cousin brother, he brought me up, or whatever. So everyone's related, and it's not like determining the next of kin is not as easy as it is for non-Aboriginal families. And everyone is family, like I just said, even I'm family. I was looking at helping this young fellow. He's been in our ICU a few times now, and I was helping him with his daily ablutions, because I'm nice like that. I like helping out. And I was just packing up and washing up and getting ready to go, and he said, "Thank you, old lady grandmother." It was kind of to the hilarity of probably the only two older people than me that work in the ICU, but I quite liked it actually, because an old lady grandmother is one of wisdom and one who has respect. So we're great mates now. And food, every culture loves food, don't they? It's so important. We all like going out for tea, and I like making lemon tart, as we've discussed. But food really is important in Aboriginal family and people. And you can, when you talk to families and you do the whole top to toe, he's on the breathing machine, on the kidney machine, and he's got the tube in the nose, taking Tucker into the tummy talk. You can go through that whole bit, and then at the end of it they'll say, eating all right? Because that's, of all this catastrophe that's happening, they know that, you know, it's that guttural thing, you've got to have food to live. One day I was looking after this lady, she had some great big gut operation, and a few days later her auntie brought her in, this is not a fib, an old milk tin with brackish mangrove water with grilled long bums, and they are long bums there. They are a good source of bush food. They're and it really was, the emphasis was from Auntie, you eat these, you will get better. They are good tucker, I'm sure they are good for you, but probably not 2 days or 4 days after you've had a big gut operation. And maybe we should leave it till next week, I said. And I hope you appreciate my dedication to the job. I got about 56 sandfly bites taking that picture. Oh, it's a laugh, isn't it? And I just want to mention this, like food in community. Sometimes in the bigger communities where there's a reasonable sized shop, unfortunately our Aboriginal people have moved away from the bush tucker and eat from the community shop. Now, the community shop, they've got to earn a living, I suppose. There's a lot of money involved in freighting in food from town, and you've got to store it, etc. But that dog standing at the door there is probably the only one that can afford to eat at the shop. A colleague of mine was in a remote community just a couple of weeks ago, and it was $5.50 for one orange. But, you know, the 7-year-old who walked in after her got freely, everything's super-sized now, isn't it? And got a 3-litre bottle of Fanta and a packet of chips, you know. And this is what people will do. If you've got to feed your children, how can you, and you've got $20, what are you going to do if one orange is $5.50? Anyway, so this, you know, you can see where diabetes, heart disease is probably on the rise, and not helped by the food that is realistically available to our community members. End of life. End of life is different. It's different for everyone. It's different in every culture. But some of our Aboriginal people, they die alone in the ICU because there is no one. They've lost their way. They've lost their family. The same as non-Aboriginal people, that happens sometimes. But sometimes there are commonalities when we know family for a patient. There can be, there is a sort of series of events that families will go through when it's coming up for sorry business. But family meetings, we hold family meetings, the intensivist does, to prepare for the end of life, you know, hold the discussions, and those discussions, the intensivist can be in a room, or the registrar will be in a room with up to 25 to 50 people, and you can tell the story, and we try to direct the story at the spokesperson, the one who can interpret and translate for the rest of the family. But it doesn't matter. Still, you will have to go round the room because, you know, 7 or 10 other people will want to ask that same question, and they want you to tell them the answer to their question. So it can be quite challenging, but patience is the key, and it's really important that we don't rush that process. We have to allow them that. Grief can be really vocal and demonstrative, and really, if you've never seen it before or heard it before, it can be quite scary. So if we've got new staff, we really need to prepare them for this. I remember my first death. I was looking after an Aboriginal elder man. He was dying. It was when we were in the old ICU up on the 7th floor, and the man was brain dead, and they were going to take away the breathing machine. Family had gathered, but and we were in a side room, and the family just kept pouring into this side room, and I was pushed to the back, not physically pushed to the back, but my place was at the back. I really had no place in that room at that time. But then, to my horror, his wife jumped on the bed, straddled her husband and was, "Don't leave me," you know, and I was, oh my God, and the ventilator's going bonkers, but I thought, what's she going to do? Kill him? Like he was brain dead. There was nothing I can do, and it's really important that you give them the opportunity to do that. A lot of the ladies will do have sorry scars on their face. In community, they will literally pick up rocks and bash their face. They will have open flesh wounds from that. I've seen people in the ICU, ladies, they just drop themselves on the floor, and you think, oh, she's having a seizure, but she's just doing her sorry business. So this is confronting, and it's scary if you haven't seen it before. It's also confronting and scary for our other patients and families in the ICU. Where possible, and it's not all possible, there's so many resources and logistics, but we have on occasions returned people to country to die, because that is really what people want to do. They want to go home to die. But like I say, it's difficult to do this. There's a lot to engage, and really you have to do a risk management thing on this, because it's all well and good sending someone home on BiPAP and a bit of NORAD and some morphine till they get under the tree that they want to get under, but it's the consequences of the clinician that are left thereafter. You know, there can be a system of blame and anger and payback after end of life. So I just wanted to indulge you, I suppose, or indulge myself on one of my favourite nursing stories. Sometimes when you make a connection with Aboriginal people and looking after them, it's that there's something special, really something special. It gets under your skin, and I think that's why a lot of nurses that stay in the Northern Territory, in Darwin and the top end, it's because they like that connection. But one day I was looking after this lady. She'd had help. I helped her with a shower. She was in an isolation room, and I noticed she had long nails and toenails. And it was a lazy Sunday afternoon, gone are those days. But I thought, I'll go in there and have time. She was on her own. I thought, I'll go in there and have time with her and see if she wants me to do her nails. And she was happy for me to do her nails. We both sat on the floor, and I soaked her hands, and I cut her nails, and I moisturised, and I did the same for her feet. We said nothing. We said nothing all that time. It would have been, 50 minutes, an hour, I don't know. She was just watching me as I crafted away, and I had my eye on my craft. And when it was all over, she put her legs out and she put her hands up, and she didn't say anything for ages, and I thought, oh God, I hope I have done the right thing, because I was a bit worried what she was going to say. I couldn't turn back, could I? But I was a bit worried. And she said, "Thank you, sister. I can walk for miles now." And I just thought, I don't know if that lady got back to walking on her country, but I do hope she did. And I hope maybe she has fond memories of me as I have of her. It is really, will always stay with me, that beautiful memory of that day. And just a closing thought. It is true that Ballender is Aboriginal word for non-Aboriginal people. Ballender sometimes use bad words for us and have bad opinions about Aboriginal people. The reason for that is that often Ballender have not much knowledge about our way of living. Our way is very much different to European way. That was written in 1976 by an Aboriginal elder from Milingimbi, and it's true today. And thank you for your attention and listening to me. Hopefully we'll see you in the Northern Territory. And just our waiting room was in need of a bit of a revamp, and I got the staff to submit their favourite photos of the territory to help take our families and patients maybe a little bit home. And that's what we come up with. Our director actually ended up putting that photo montage together, but it is a beautiful piece of work. And that, my friends, is me.
Thank you, Jane. That was fantastic. It's probably going to come as an offence coming from someone who's not Aboriginal, but I would consider you the old lady grandmother of cultural considerations. So that was fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. We probably have time just for one question, if there is any. Oh, just one at the back. Cindy.
Just to ask you about the stolen generation thing. When I worked in some time ago in Sydney, people would want to tell us their ethnicity because they thought we were going to steal their children. Is that an issue for you up in the Northern Territories?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
So, when I worked in Sydney a long time ago, people would not tell us their ethnicity because they were concerned that their children would be stolen. It was around the time the stolen generation stories coming out. Is that still an ongoing issue for you now?
No, I don't think that's... I'm understanding what you're saying. No, people are proud to be Aboriginal now. Did I get that right?
Yeah, just,
darling people.
We're probably just one more quick question because otherwise we'll run over time.
Thank you, Jane. That was a good presentation. I'm Vetri from Auckland, New Zealand. We have a multicultural country. We do have a multicultural people like Maori, the people of the land, and Chinese, Indians. Well, I'm proud to be a Maori Kiwi Indian. Now, my question is, so we do have a cultural competency modules like when you start as a nurse or an health professional, you need to complete it to competent in the cultural competencies. My question is, in the area of your work or in your hospital, do you have any continuing education for every nurses or every health professionals to care for the Aboriginals, like modules for cultural competencies, and what measures you take for their cultural safety, that's Aboriginals' cultural safety has been met? And do you really educate the nurses for the importance of the culture?
There's a couple of questions there, I think. It is mandatory that when it's part of our essentials training, when we start at the hospital, it's part of your orientation that you attend an Aboriginal cultural awareness program. That currently is a day program. Every week there is information sessions about Aboriginal culture, but we haven't got it as we haven't closed the loop like I think they have in New Zealand. I'm aware, I think treaty has made things a bit more in line of the needs of healthcare workers in particular in looking after their Indigenous patients. So work in progress, I suppose, but definitely when you study at the Northern Territory University, Charles Darwin University, you will do units in culture and cultural competency.
Thank you, good to know.
Okay, I think we might move on if that's okay. Thank you, everyone.